NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte says the shooting down of a ballistic missile headed for Turkey by NATO air defenses does not provide immediate reason to bring the alliance into the conflict. NATO does have Article 5, which states that an armed attack against one NATO member will be considered an attack against them all.
Nobody's talking about Article 5, and the most important thing is that our adversaries have seen yesterday that NATO is so strong and so vigilant, and even more vigilant, if possible, since Saturday because of the situation, of course, in the Middle East. So they see and know and sense that our military are on this.
NATO air defenses destroyed an Iranian ballistic missile as it headed into Turkish airspace, marking the first time the alliance member has been drawn into the conflict and raising the possibility of an expansion involving its allies. Well, with me now is Eyre, former member of the Barack Obama administration, the negotiating team for the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action deal with Iran. He's also now at the Middle East Institute. Alan, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Scott.
There's a lot to cover off. There are a lot more developments today, including, we're drawing in Azerbaijan apparently into this conflict targeted by a missile from Iran, Bahrain saying that they have been struck as well. For you, as we watch the widening of this conflict, how concerning is that as we continue to watch now in a sixth day?
Well, it's very concerning. I mean, it was predictable, but it's still unfortunate that the tendency of this war, once the U.S. and Israel started it, was to escalation. Part of the problem is to avoid leadership decapitation, Iran decentralized leadership in its military. So a lot of these missiles are being shot off without necessarily the top military leadership approving it. So that also leads to unfortunate, dangerous, and deadly consequences.
Do you believe that some of these other countries are going to be drawn into this conflict right now? We talked about NATO and at least for now, and what happened with Turkey yesterday, not going to be a part of it. But, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and others that are being targeted by some of these strikes as well, will they be forced to get into this war? Because we have seen some of the rhetoric that's coming out of them that they're clearly not pleased with what is happening.
That's a great question, Scott. I mean, the issue is this. They're already drawn in the war. The Gulf countries have been attacked. They're a part of the war. But in terms of whether other militaries need to be involved in the attack against Iran, no, they don't. From a purely military point of view, the U.S. and Israel have total military superiority. They can do whatever they want. So no other militaries are really needed unless possibly to help escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz. So the real dynamic here is, can Iran inflict enough damage on the Gulf countries to increase pressure on President Trump to look for an off-ramp?
Let's talk about U.S. President Trump, who we have heard in an interview with Axios today saying that he wants to be involved or needs to be involved in the selection of Iran's next supreme leader and next leader. We have heard repeatedly, and did yesterday too, from Caroline Leavitt, that one of the goals of this conflict was not for regime change. But clearly it feels that that has changed with the messaging from the president this morning. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't think we can count on anyone in this administration, to include the president, from giving us over time a consistent and honest answer as to what they're looking for or why the war started. It does seem to be the case that President Trump thought, much like Venezuela, he could remove one person, put someone else in more user-friendly, and then cut a deal with that person. That's not going to happen. Iran is not Venezuela. So in terms of whatever plan B President Trump has, since he cannot just replace one or two people in the leadership and hope for a better deal, it's still unclear what the desired end state for the U.S. is. We know the desired end state for Israel, and that's the collapsing of the Iranian regime.
And speaking to that point too as well, Alan, and we talk about the end game in all of this, what's your best guess on timeline? Because things are still escalating. We're almost a week into this conflict as well. The president and other members of the administration have said, it was going to be a matter of weeks for this. Do you believe they're underestimating that? And really, are we looking at another situation where this could be drawn out once again?
Well, both sides are doing a lot of signaling, trying to show that they can go as long as they need to and outlast the strategic patience of the other. So one has to be careful. But it is certainly the case that in terms of logistics and supplies, the U.S. can go for weeks. As President Trump and others have said, even though there's a race in terms of a finite number of missile interceptors to counteract against the relatively cheap drones that Iran is sending out, we can keep bombing Iran, both us and Israel, for weeks and weeks. So it's just a question for the U.S. of running through the target list that they have, and then once those are gone through, looking for targets of opportunity. Needless to say, this is causing untold death and destruction in Iran.
Alan Eyre, we really appreciate your time and your insight for us today. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Scott.